All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this industry connection. We are so excited to have Ben here from Spot Screening. Before I pass things over to him, I just want to drop a few housekeeping things. Winston already said this. If you were here, sorry, you'll hear it again. But if you are joining us on Zoom, down at the bottom, you should see both a chat option and a Q&A. The Q&A is the best place to drop questions for Ben. There's an upvote feature. So if someone asks a question that you also want the answer to, go ahead and give it an upvote. That will tell us that it's super important, and we'll make sure we get to it. Leave the Zoom chat for other comments and whatnot. Questions need to go in the Q&A. If you're joining us on social media, you can just drop your questions in the comments, and we'll make sure those get asked as well. I also want to mention, if you are an ACT member and you're interested in joining us for our virtual community theater management conference, we have two different virtual conferences coming up in April. West Coast, April 5th to the 7th, and East Coast, the 12th to the 14th. The registration does increase tomorrow. So if you want to get in on the early bird rates, do that now. Alrighty, enough about that. Let's pass things over to Ben. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, David. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So first off, thank you everybody for jumping on. I think about this group on the call here as like doing theater arts, which is a lot more fun than what I do. Community theater is something that I personally love. I was a theater major at Middle Tennessee State University. And so been many years since I was a part of that, but exciting group, just an exciting environment and atmosphere. And I couldn't be more excited and just looking forward to talking to everybody today and meeting some of the members as we kind of move forward and roll out this program. To give a little bit of context, the conversations on this started because a lot of community theater programs and national theater programs and just regional theaters are not doing background checks, but it was something that had come up a lot in questions. Should we be doing it? Is that important? Just wanted some details. So the point of this call today is I'll walk through kind of just high level what a background check is. Why do companies background check? We'll answer questions. Obviously, this is interactive, so feel free to ask any questions that you have. We'll have some Q&A at the end. I'll show some screenshots of kind of our portal and how the process works. And then, we'll go through some details of the actual member program and what you all get with your ACT membership. Let's see if I can move the slides here. There we go. And one thing real quick I did want to mention kind of before I go any further is really like, what is a background check? So, and when we say background checks, what we do for companies, it's not only just a pre-employment criminal background check, but we do all of the drug testing, we do I-9s, we do social media screening, reference checks. That basically, when we say background check throughout this presentation, we're really talking about all of the different aspects of kind of screening it could be an employee, it could be a volunteer. This is a unique group as far as the hiring goes. I was pretty involved with some of the theaters here in the Middle Tennessee area. And, I worked as an intern on some plays with one of the large Nashville theaters. And I was an intern. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't getting paid anything, but I was still interacting with the rest of, the actors, the production. I was around some of the kind of younger actors. And so this could be employees, this could be volunteers, this could be interns, anyone that is kind of under the umbrella of your theater doing things from acting to production. And the point of the kind of the standard pre-employment criminal background check, which is what we're going to mainly talk about today, is to pull records that are essential for making those hiring decisions and just to make sure that who you're hiring is safe and they fit the culture that you're trying to, create and, that you're trying to maintain over time at your theater. And so a lot of these are database searches. Some of them are, county criminal, kind of jurisdictional type of searches at the state, federal level. So we'll talk a little bit about that in detail, but at a high level, a background check's pretty simple. You'll put an order in, you get a report back. Most of the time there's not gonna be anything on it, but occasionally there will be a criminal record on there. And that doesn't mean you can't work with the person. That doesn't mean you can't hire them. You can't use them as a volunteer. That just means that you have that information to be empowered to make the best decision for you, your team, and the rest of the theater. So why background check? And this is going to be specific to theaters. Why would a theater background check? What we tend to focus on when it comes to our clients that are in that theater space or in that kind of the space similar to the theater arts is vulnerable populations. So obviously the first thing that comes to mind here, and I think probably the most high risk aspect of this would be if you have, child or just young people as actors or part of the production. These are vulnerable populations, and you don't want anyone who has had a history of, abuse. It could be abuse. It could be any number of things. But if you have children as part of your, theater arts, could be program, there's summer camps. There's a lot of different scenarios where you could have vulnerable people from they could be young, or it could be other groups of vulnerable population, elderly people, adults even with disabilities. And that's one of the things that's cool about theater arts is it's an open environment. That's one of the things that makes community theater great is it's a diverse group of people. It's open to all walks of life. And again, that's what makes it so awesome. But with that, you just want to make sure that you understand who you're hiring, and you get some insight and visibility into their background. And again, that doesn't mean that you don't have to hire them, but you can take that information and again, be empowered to make the right decision for everyone involved. And what other risks? Some of y'all, I'm sure, sitting there thinking, well, we don't have children really as part of the production. And other than children, there are other aspects to this. There's production. I remember when I was at Middle Tennessee State, one of the classes I took was a lighting class, and we had to hang the lights up, which was very hard actually, and I had some risk associated with it. So, when it comes to theater arts productions, there are some kind of production aspects that do have risk, whether it's hanging a light or any number of things involved in the production. You want to make sure that the people doing those tasks that are a little bit riskier, you probably wouldn't want someone hanging a light who has gotten, 5 counts of, drunk and disorderly conduct or something like that, just using an example. So there's production risk and there's financial risks. Typically you're going to have somebody handling either cash at the box office or maybe taking payments over the phone, over the internet. So maybe somebody you're hiring for accounting. Anyone who's involved in those kind of financial aspects of the business, you want to make sure that they have not had any sort of kind of financial crimes. We can do searches as far as like liens and kind of financial history. That is one of the searches that we offer. And so for those workers specifically, you may want to do some kind of financially focused background checks, and you'd want to clear them as well. And then on top of that, I was doing some research for this presentation, and I was looking at americantheater.org, and it had a list of all of the theaters that had closed down from 2021 to I think 2023. And it was a large list. It was a large list of theaters across the country. And when I think about community theater, I think about kind of a shoestring type of financial situation. You don't want to, it's usually funded by obviously ticket sales. There's donations and a lot of nonprofit type of groups, and that type of setup, it probably could not absorb something that would cause them problems from a reputation standpoint. So from a reputation perspective, you don't want to be on the news for the wrong reasons. And so when it comes to community theater, the community obviously is a big part of what you do, and part of maintaining that relationship with the public, with the community, is maintaining that, A+ reputation. And, again, if you're on the news we could name a bunch of different things that could happen, but, if you were on the news for the wrong reasons, that could really hurt the reputation, and that could end up, these things could hurt donations, hurt you financially. And, hurt ticket sales, any number of things. So you want to keep your reputation solid. And part of that is, knowing who is part of your production, the actors, directors, everyone involved. You want to make sure that they're going to uphold that culture and uphold that reputation to the public. And you don't want to bring somebody in who could possibly harm that. Theater's supposed to be fun. Theater's a really cool aspect of our culture and of the arts. And you wouldn't want to risk that by damaging your reputation by hiring the wrong person. And so, and especially theater's interesting because it's not like a doctor or a lawyer or a, executive in some finance department at a healthcare company. It's a group of people typically that don't have as the resume is all over the place. Maybe you moved around. It's part of that kind of openness to a more eclectic group of employees. And with that, it can be harder to track. We talk to a lot of companies that are hiring, their agriculture, let's say, and they're hiring a, farmhand from the local community, and they may know that person, and people in the community might know them. They might be able to check around and just have a little bit of visibility into who that person is in the community. Typically, when we talk to like theater arts groups, it can be somebody who just moved to town who is acting in one city and just moved to a new city, and they kind of move around a little bit more of a, nomadic type of lifestyle. And so you don't know who that person is. You don't know their background. You can look at their resume, you can look at their, IMDb or whatever else you can grab online, their Facebook, but for you to really get a full picture of their background, especially with that type of hire, a background check is really important to being able to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to have the full picture of who you're bringing in. So what is the process? So that's a picture of the portal. I did a screen grab when you log in. So how does a background check actually happen? What you would need to do, and we'll keep this real high level, but essentially you're gathering information from this individual, you're putting it into a system, and you're sending it out, and you're hitting all the databases that you order. So a standard background check is typically like a address verification, nationwide criminal, sex offender, and 7-year county criminal. That's kind of the industry standard as far as a search for a background check that doesn't have any sort of specific other things added to it. You can do state, federal, a few other things, but those are hitting databases, and those are hitting the counties that this individual has lived in. And so the great thing about background checks and logging into a portal and ordering these is that they're fairly simple. It's not like you're implementing some big payroll system or HR system or accounting system. We set you up with a login. Your packages are loaded in there that you want to order, and you gather the candidate's information and put it in the system. Now, so there's two ways to do this. You can either get all the candidates' information yourself and have somebody on your HR team or an office manager or somebody put that in the system and order a background check, or you can have a link emailed to the candidate, they fill out their own information, and then that submits the background check. So that kind of automates it a little bit and eliminates some of the work on the internal team there. So you can just send an email and be done with it. Also drug testing. So I just wanted to mention that briefly. Drug testing is, it's kind of getting a little bit less popular, I would say, just a little bit. A lot of companies still do it. I didn't want to spend a ton of time on that because I don't know that that's something that this group would really start with. But if it is something that you wanted to do, we go through LabCorp and eScreen, two huge networks across the country. And so if you didn't want to wanted to run a drug test, it could be pre-employment or it could be a suspicion test. If you had somebody and you thought, well, they seem a little off, you are able compliantly to send them to a clinic and have them, submit a sample, and then it would go to the lab, and then it would come back, whether they're positive or not. There's 5, 10 panel. You can do no THC drug tests. You can do physicals. There's a whole long list of drug tests and other occupational tests that you can do as well. And And so the background check, the drug test, then there's I-9 references, there's employment verifications, there's a number of different things that we can do. But as I mentioned earlier, the main thing that we offer is the standard background check, which is what I think would probably be utilized most by this group. And so I want to pause there real quick. David, I don't know if I'm missing any. Looks like I've got a question here. What are the possibilities for an individual? Okay, great question. So the question is, what are the possibilities for an individual to falsify info through the self-application email process? So again, great question. So when we do a SSN trace, which is the address verification, that actually is pulling up their address history. And so when we do that, if nothing comes up, and that's based on credit history. So just to go into the weeds a little bit here, when you're doing the social security number trace, that's the address history, those addresses are used for those county criminal searches. So the most kind of in-depth criminal aspect of the search is the county criminal. That's when we're going literally to county records of where they've lived, and those are being pulled. A lot of the counties are digital, so it's automated, but some of them are manual, and we have court runners that'll pull those. So there's a couple things that can happen that would help you kind of have a little bit of a red flag on whether or not this person gave the correct information. The first one would be if the social security number has no matches. So again, to pull those addresses, we're doing that against credit history. So all background check companies, like you've got to pull the address history from somewhere. There's no like database that does that. And so we do it against credit history. We're not pulling their credit, but we're just getting the addresses from a credit database. And so if you have if someone's 18 or 19, that could happen anyway. But if you're looking at, let's say, a 30-year-old and they don't have anything come up, then either you have the wrong social or maybe they gave you the wrong social. So that would be a really good way right there to see if there was anything that was put in there incorrectly. So that's the reason for that SSN trace, is to kind of validate that person's address history off of their social. And then that's how we can pull the county criminal. And then on the nationwide criminal search, and to go into a little bit more detail on that nationwide criminal search, we're hitting dozens of databases. The nationwide criminal is the main database, sex offenders, the other database, and then Office of Foreign Asset Control. Those are probably the three, most talked about databases, but we're hitting a laundry list of other databases. And in that search, if there's no record or no hit, so like if it's not verified, so if the person, say, puts in a different name or their birthday, and so that's the other way that we're validating it. So if it doesn't come up, like there's no person found, then obviously that would be another red flag that, hey, they probably put something in here incorrectly. Let's see what else we got here. Cool. That was a great question. Great question. And so like, as far as so in that situation, we're really taking their data and we're pulling from databases, and we'll know if something was put in there incorrectly. If you're doing other searches, employment history, that type of thing, then that would be, require the person to put in the right information. But most of this is we can kind of validate it. And just to show real quick. We don't need a ton of data on this. First name, you don't even have to have the middle name. You can put N/A there. So this is where you go to put in the candidate's information. So first name, middle, last name, date of birth, social. And so, if we end up, if I end up speaking to any of you on the line, I could show you a kind of a full demo. We could walk through your situation, and then we can kind of talk through the portal, the authorization forms, which are automated in the system through email, or we give you a PDF and you can have the person fill it out. The main compliance aspect of this is just getting an authorization form signed, which is very simple. And then this is what a report looks like. So that's just the first page of a report, fairly simple. You can download them. Your records would be housed in our portal. You could also download a PDF and keep them for your records. And so the whole thing it's fairly simple. I mean, there's little granular details that I could get into with, any of you on another call, but from a high level, you're gathering the information, you're sending it out, you're getting a report back. If there's a record, that would show up on here. And then from there, all of those records are going to be housed within the portal. And a big part of this is from a compliance standpoint. If something were to ever happen, if you could say, hey, we background check these people, yeah, some guy showed up drunk and fell off a ladder and landed on a kid's head, but we validated him through a background check. That's a big part of this is from a reputation and a risk mitigation perspective. If you're doing what you can do, then even if something happens, at least at that point, you can say, hey, we did our due diligence on the front end. We performed a background check. We got another question here. Yeah, so Joel, great question. So FCRA, so everything that we follow for this situation, it's because we're not pulling medical records, but that is a good question. And that it's the FCRA is really what we're following. And that's why they're signing that document. So they're signing something that's giving you permission to pull the data from these databases, essentially saying you're using it for pre-employment reasons and that you're not sharing it. And everything that we do as part of our engine is a compliance, it's focusing on the state-by-state compliance aspects. It's a fully compliant portal. And yes, we are following kind of FCRA guidelines. Let me read this other one from Adrian. Volunteer passes background check, no red flags. We don't want to say that charges that were pending. Yeah, so great question. Great question. We can only do, if something's pending, it kind of depends on, I'd be curious what you search for in that background package, because if something is, it kind of depends. So there's a ton of jurisdictions. What gets tough about background checks is that there's not some just criminal database that has every record in it automatically and you can just pull it out. The reason for these packages, and you can check states, you can check federal, is because it is a very kind of disjointed legal process and jurisdictional process, throughout the country. There's different states, there's different places. So we got to go find the data. And so depending on what's in the package, that may have been caught, and it kind of depends on where it is in the process. Because if somebody has been arrested, because at that point they weren't convicted, but they've been arrested, that record could show up. We do have records that are pending where an arrest was made. And if that was in the county criminal database, or if that was pulled from the county criminal search, if you were pulling that, that could be in there, and it should be in there. Where what we see a lot of times is companies search for, sometimes you'll be set up with a nationwide, like that nationwide criminal search, for example. If you just do that, that has 10% of criminal records in it. So we bump into companies all the time that are just doing that. And they'll say, yeah, we're doing a background check, or we go to backgroundcheck.com and do the free background check. If you're not going to the county level, it's going to be hard to find. And if you were going to that level and it wasn't in there, then it just wasn't far along enough in the process in that particular county court to be something that could have been pulled. And so it's a combination of two things. You want to make sure that you're searching, doing a real background check that's thorough. That's a big part of it. And then as long as you're doing that, you're checking the counties, you're kind of doing what you can. It's not 100% foolproof. Things do get kind of slid through. But another thing that you can do is you can do criminal monitoring. So we do have companies, that is something that we offer, where you can monitor the databases, criminal monitoring, and we're periodically checking these databases. And so that does help kind of mitigate that risk if there is something that's kind of coming down the pike that maybe didn't show up in a pre-employment process. We often have 30 people on a cast, both kids and adults, 3 to 4 times a year. How expensive is it to do a really basic background check on all adults? Yeah, great question. So let's see if I can get here real quick. All right, so and this is part of the member screening program. We can do a little bit of details on pricing. So a standard package, like what I laid out there before, which is unlimited county criminal searches, goes back 7 years. that nationwide criminal, sex offender, Office of Foreign Asset Control, all those databases. And then that SSN trace, which has that address history. We typically see that as about a $35 to $45 package. Because of your membership, we're doing that for $25. So it will be $25. You would get all of that. And then the only thing on top of that is that some counties have like a county database fee. It just kind of depends on where they've lived. You know, like New York has some of those. Like I'm in Tennessee, 90% of the counties don't have any of those fees, but there's a few that do. And so what we tell people is to think of it as about a 15%, an additional 15%. So like, let's say you were hiring 4 people. From a budgetary standpoint, I would plan on, you know, $100 plus about $15 more, about 115. And we just pass all background check companies do this. We just pass that data access fee along. So like I know in the state of Tennessee for like an MVR, motor vehicle record search, I want to say it's like $8 or something like that. And so we just pass that along, the $8, which is what most companies do. And so that's the standard package. You can strip that down a little bit. Like if you wanted to just do that nationwide criminal database with that SSN trace, that's the lowest we get. I can send that pricing out, but that one's $12. And so if you wanted to just say, like, we have some companies who are like, hey, you know, we don't have much money. We think most of the people we're hiring are good people. We know who they are, but we do want to do something. You know, we want to check that box. Yes, $25 per person. Yes, good question, Michael and Karen. $25. And again, if you wanted to strip that down, you could get it down to that $12 price point. Is the cost based on each county that you search, or can you search all counties in a specific area? So yeah, it's a 7-year unlimited county. Great question. 7-year unlimited county criminal search. So it goes back 7 years. So when we pull that address history, you can also ask if you wanted to in the application process, you can say, hey, what addresses have you lived at? And you can add those in if we don't pull them automatically. So that county criminal search goes back all counties, unlimited 7 years. And then that cost that I was saying is if any of those counties have a data access fee, so like where they charge you to pull that, usually not much, it's typically about $10, $15, then that gets passed along. But that's, again, you know, about a 15%, we would say, add on just to kind of do a budgetary number would be, that would be the additional cost on the counties. But everything that we're pulling, it's unlimited 7 years. And we can go back 10 years too, if you'd like, for the same price. So $12 level. So that the way that one works is the SSN trace. So we do the address history, and then we do that nationwide criminal search, which hits a ton of databases. It hits that nationwide criminal, hits sex offender, it hits Office of Foreign Asset Control, and it hits, I've got a whole spreadsheet. There's about 100 plus databases that we hit. It's not the most in-depth because it doesn't pull from those counties. It doesn't pull from the state, but it does hit a national database. And the way that one works from a compliance perspective, if that does pull a record, then we do have to pull from the counties. So it's basically like, hey, we'll do this stripped down version. Most people are not going to, there's not going to be hit on a record for most people. But let's say you pull 20, one of them may have something. And then if there is a hit on that, like a record that comes up, then from a compliance perspective, we have to then search the counties before we then kind of move forward. So it would be that basic search unless there was a hit, and then it would kind of progress to that standard package in that situation. Make sure I'm not missing anything else. 5 minutes all. Cool. So kind of next steps on this, you know, I'm happy to jump on with anybody, walk through a demo, answer more specific questions. I know that this was fairly high level, kind of quick. There's a lot of different little aspects to this. We can do I-9s, there's social media searches, there's a lot of different stuff here. But for the most part, what I would keep in mind here is, you know, I don't know how $25 sounds or $12 sounds, but, you know, when it comes to say hiring 30 people or hiring 20 or 50, you know, I know there's theaters at all sizes as part of this association. But we would love to jump on and talk through it with you, answer any questions, show a demo, and get you set up. Kind of last thing I'll say is that setting this up, there's no contract. All you have to do is I'd send you a link, you'd set up an account, We jump on the line, get your packages uploaded, show you how to do some orders, and then you're good to go. So you're not locked in anything. There's no monthly minimum. There's no monthly fee. There's no startup costs. You just pay for the orders that you put through. So there's no like, hey, $10 a month fee for just having the account open. You don't pay anything. You have dedicated support. There's a few other aspects to it that we'll probably send out, but for the most part, just know that you're not locked in anything. There's no startup cost. And we actually have a 30-day, like if you're not happy with it for some reason, we won't even send you a first invoice after the first 30 days. We'll basically reimburse that. So we tried to eliminate all risk and really give the members an opportunity to try this out, see what they think, and try to help just add a level of security to their theater. And so as you can see on the screen there, that's my email, that's my direct line. Feel free to call or text. That's our website. And so we would love to have calls with anybody who's interested in kind of looking into this and exploring it further. And again, setting it up is very simple. And so I appreciate the questions. Those are great questions from the group. And I think that's pretty much everything from me. Again, we're looking forward to working with y'all and everybody at the association here. Thank you for letting me come on and kind of talk to the group today.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate the opportunity for members to hear about your services. I think we're at that time where if every theater isn't already thinking about background checks, they should be. So thank you for sharing your organization with us. Thank you, attendees, for joining us and learning about spot screening. I do just want to share a quick link to our webinar page of our website so you can see all the other upcoming roundtables and industry connections and master classes we have coming up, including next Tuesday, a roundtable on volunteer recruitment and training and retention. And then in March 7th, we have a virtual masterclass, Don't Let the Door Hit You on the Ass, a guide to succession planning. You can find that information at the link I just sent. And there's a link to our registration for our virtual CTMC coming up in April. A reminder that the early bird rates end tomorrow. As always, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you at another ACT event soon.